Good afternoon. Oh, it is on. Good, everybody. My name is Eleanor Swanson, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Community Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm very pleased to welcome you all here to this wonderful event. So first, I want to make the formal acknowledgement, which is we acknowledge that Newfoundland and Labrador is comprised of the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. It's been 5 years since we first released the Vital Signs Report. So on the anniversary, we've gone back and looked at the 5 year ago report and built on that, added some new things and done some comparisons, which I know you're going to be very interested to hear. But it gives us it gives the foundation, Community Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador, great pleasure to be involved with this very important document. It is based on a lot of uh, work and research and creativity from certainly from the Harris Center and the researchers who are looking at that. And I look forward to the panel that's going to be coming up, to the presentations that will be given to you in the next few minutes. And there'll be a good opportunity as well for people to ask questions and have discussions. And there's a nice comfortable area there that the panelists will sit and be able to chat with you. So that basically that's it from my perspective. Very proud to be here and look forward to a great afternoon.
Thanks, Eleanor. I'm Kathy Newhook. I'm the lead for Vital Signs for the Harris Center, and I'm going to give you a quick little overview of what the Vital Signs is. I know lots of you in the room know this stuff already, but just to acknowledge that it is part of a national initiative. It's a national brand from the Community Foundations of Canada, and we're lucky to partner with the Community Foundation on this project. It's a collaboration, as I said, between the Community Foundation of Newfoundland and Labrador and the Memorial University's Harris Center. And it's in partnership with Saltwire Networks, better known to you guys as Telegram, Western Star, and the community papers, of course, the weeklies around the province. For Vital Signs, it all starts with a conversation. So we hope that this report is going to do that for you. We've included lots of information in this year's report, and we've tried to pack as much information as we can into the 16 pages. We hope you pass it along. Take stacks with you on the way out the door, please. We have a lot. And we hope it's also a tool for you to learn about organizations and individuals in the province that are working hard to improve our province. You can contact us if you're looking for ways to connect, or better yet, you can log on to Memorial University's YAFL, and we can help broker some opportunities and further research. But ultimately, we want this report to lead to action. Big or small, local, provincial, if you're motivated by what you read, use that as your starting point to take on some positive change. It's been 5 years, as Eleanor mentioned. And every year we've taken a little bit of a different approach. We've chosen different themes, sliced the apple a little differently. This year we wanted to take advantage of that 5-year mark and take a look back at the first Vital Signs report and what's changed, what's the same. In that first edition, we focused on a looming population shift. After 5 years, we wanted to see how we've been adapting, preparing, collaborating, and innovating. Take a look at what challenges still exist and what new challenges have arisen. How are the conversations that we're having in our boardrooms, coffee shops, and kitchens evolving? So the results you have in your hands, 16 pages, 9 expert columns, over 20 interviews, 70 infographics, and we can thank Rogue Penguin for their wonderful work on that. 12 stories or case studies, and it's focused on everything from economy to health to diversity. And now I'm going to pass it over to Rob Greenwood, Executive Director of the Harris Center, to walk you through the meat, shall we say.
Thanks very much, Kathy, and just fantastic to be here in the Mira Innovation Exchange. First time for Vital Signs here, and we've had an amazing response to this facility so far in the community. And someone asked me actually with Vital Signs, does the crowd get bigger each year? And I think it does. I think we had 160 people RSVP'd here today. And I see Ainsley here, who collaborated with us very closely on this in the past. And the Community Foundation, none of this, as Kathy mentioned, would exist without the Community Foundation. And the Harris Center and the Community Foundation board reps met about 6 years ago, or 6.5, and said, this is a match made in heaven. And it certainly has been. So I'm going to walk you through some of the meat of this, but you all have copies in your hands, and I'm going to skim the surface, as is my wont, because we do have some of the expert people in the room who help put it together. But of course, all of you in this room, from government, industry, community, university, college, are the real experts. And so, like everything with Vital Signs, this is meant to be a jumping off point into a conversation. So I can't but give my own opinions occasionally. So I'll try to provoke a little bit as we go along, but then you'll get your chance in the Q&A and discussion. People have loved right from the start the infographics, which is a key part of Vital Signs. And we've used this kind of bubble diagram. If you break the whole province as if it were a community of 100 people in different ways over the 5 years, we've looked at that. And if you look at the age breakdown there in the green bubbles, the one for people 65 plus in 2015 in a community of 100, basically talking sense, but makes it easier to wrap your head around. 2014 would have been 16. Now there's 19. And that trend is inexorable. We will be successful with immigration and migration and diversity. But the stats are pretty clear on the overarching population of our province, and it's worldwide. Fertility rates are dropping. As women get more education, they have fewer children. And so, as Don Hogan from ACOA years ago said to us, in 15 years, the average kid in Newfoundland and Labrador will not have a brother or a sister, will not have a cousin, will not have an uncle or an aunt. And that blows my mind. And I tell this story every year at Vital Signs. Sorry if you've been here before. My mom's a Bercy, youngest of 10. I have 54 first cousins. I can't conceive of this place without that. But that is the reality. So when we look at these numbers and we look at the trends throughout our economy, our society, our province, rural and urban, that's kind of an underlying fabric that we need to think of, along with a whole bunch of others. I won't go into the others in great detail, but some of the regional breakdowns, which are the black bubbles there. Northeast Avalon now, St. John's labor market area, is 40% of the total provincial population. Tricon, so you add in the Bay de Verde Peninsula, where the Bercies are from, that's 9% on top of that. And that doesn't include the Southern Avalon. And so we are becoming more like Iceland, where Reykjavik region is over 50% of the population. And yet we have dynamic, successful centers throughout the island and in Labrador. And in fact, the stats outside the Northeast in terms of demographics are strongest in Labrador. So we need to think about the aging population, the changing rural-urban shift, and a lot of good work done by all the organizations in this room about how we innovate in economic, in social, in public sector to meet these new realities. We can have lots of discussion about that as the afternoon goes on. Then we have a couple of pages, and I have a couple of slides on the economy. And of course, when Vital Signs started, we were in the midst of the boom. And we had some quotes from Doug May early on talking about how we were in the midst of the boom, but how, you know, in a resource economy, boom is usually followed by bust. And none of us should have been surprised by that, especially when you're depending on resource commodities. And so oil prices did drop severely. Mining prices dropped. We did build up enormous capacity in our province, in the human capital during that period. And in many of my presentations about Memorial, during that time, one of the tidbits of data I like to share is, throughout that period, at any one time, there were 80 MUN co-op students in Houston, not to mention Halifax and Toronto and Calgary and Aberdeen and around the world. And so the generation, God bless them, who graduated in the midst of that, did extremely well, along with the people who were already in the labor force, many of them. But the networks they gained, the knowledge they gained, the awareness of international supply chains or whatever sector you're in, and that hasn't gone away. The human resource capacity of this province in the private sector, in the public sector, in the community sector is beyond the level it's ever been. So while the economy ebbs and flows, it's that human capacity that we need to keep thinking about. So when we look at some of the stats around GDP, mining, quarrying, oil and gas dropped from 34% of the economy GDP value of wealth created to 24%, a 10% drop. There was no sector that picked up that 10% as a growth sector. It was distributed more evenly during the downturn. When you look at employment, those weren't the leading employment sectors. Wholesale and retail, healthcare, social assistance. Construction is a really interesting sector because it's really high on GDP and really high on unemployment. But of course, construction links to other sectors. And so as goes the oil and gas or major project development or housing, so goes construction. What has been clear, and it's a theme in this year's Vital Signs, and this building is an expression of it, in fact, is the amount of innovation, entrepreneurship, startup. And those who can do, those who can't teach. I apply that only to myself, not my colleagues in the university. I've taught entrepreneurship. I come from an entrepreneurial family. I don't count myself as an entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs would choose a dental plan job if they could get one. Some entrepreneurs, and there's some in this room, can't help themselves. They can only be an entrepreneur, and I'm looking at a few of them. But when there are fewer dental plan jobs, people with the knowledge, the skills, the expectations start businesses. And this region right now is hopping in the startup community. Corner Brook, with the Navigate incubator with college and the university partnering, is hopping. And so that is creating lots of opportunities in the tech sector, and technology applies to every sector. The oceans cluster, the big thing that's been attracted because of that. And we're going to help leverage that. So there's some really interesting, and that's not showing up in the stats yet. So it'll be really interesting next Vital Signs and the one after, and especially when we get the next census, how that expresses itself. But innovation across social, economic, cultural, environmental sectors, public sector, NGOs, is happening largely out of necessity, but also largely because of the human capability we've developed in this province over the last decade and more, like we've never had before. When you look at how individuals are faring within families, average income in 2016 was just slightly below the national average. And we need to be clear, and some of the stats over the last 5 Vital Signs show that during the boom, we had growth in personal income that led the country, but it wasn't shared equally by everybody in our community. And in fact, the bottom fifth, I remember 2 or 3 years ago in Vital Signs, dropped as all the rest skyrocketed. And we needed to be ashamed of ourselves by that. And so a lot of good work is being done in the NGO, public, private sectors, but we still have real challenges. And so Vital Signs isn't just a boosterism, rah-rah. We got to celebrate the successes, but we also have to be really honest with ourselves. And someone who spoke to me in the last couple of days said, it's partly putting a mirror up to ourselves. So women and Indigenous peoples are significantly below the provincial and national averages on income. And then we have a great expert column in this section from the Status of Women Council that help us shed some light on the gender wage gap. And some of that is there in the section there. Women make up 69% of part-time workers and make up 66% of all minimum wage workers. So we need to, none of it is simple. None of it is really clear. It's multifactored. But if we're going to solve these issues, we got to dig those stats apart, get the qualitative stories, and develop policy and programs that addresses them. And there's lots of good examples. Average income for immigrants was considerably higher. And again, these are averages, mainly due to high immigrant population amongst high salaried professions, medicine and engineering. And as we've heard a lot in the news lately, consumption of goods and services increased since 2012, but household net savings dropped considerably by $3,500. And so humans are funny, you know, we get into a good time and we think it's never going to end. Some economists called it during the boom that led up to the global financial crisis last time around, irrational exuberance. And you just think it ain't ever going to stop. And the credit cards build up and all the toys build up. And then suddenly, boom is followed by bust, but the expenses don't go away. But the expectations have been raised. And we're really in the midst of that right now. Fortunately, I think we're starting to see, as we know, in the oil sector, in mining, with the ocean cluster, technology, and that'll trickle out to all the other sectors starting to turn around. And again, we have some discussion about that in a few minutes. Standard of living, and there's lots of good research around the world that shows you can have really high GDP in a jurisdiction and a lousy quality of life. I remember the stat we used to say the Exxon Valdez sank off BC, GDP went up because the cleanup effort was a massive contribution to GDP. Didn't do too many people good beyond the cleanup crews. So you need to, again, unpack the numbers and combine it with the qualitative stories. And what we have seen here clearly, in terms of the most vulnerable in our society, who are they? How can we help? Well, the Consumer Price Index, which affects us all, shows percent change from year to year. Some things saw a slight decrease in 2017, but clearly significant increases since 2013, especially meat, fruit, and veggies, which we all need. We had the opportunity this year to include data from the point-in-time count of homeless individuals conducted in St. John's this past April. And those stats are in the bar chart there on the side. In just one night, point in time, there were 165 homeless people in St. John's. 64% of them came from places other than St. John's, which is really interesting. I'll mention a bit. Many of whom came from other parts of the province, as well as from the rest of Canada and elsewhere. And we asked Erica Norman with Choices for Youth to provide some insight on challenges in particular for the LGBTQ2S youth, as organizations like Choices report that many of the young people they work with are struggling to find appropriate supports. And many come to St. John's looking to access services they can't receive elsewhere. So there's kind of push and pull with some of those trends. Then we get into health and wellness. And one aspect of that is the formal medical system. And we ask, how healthy is our healthcare system? And how can we improve it? And we looked at the cost of providing healthcare in our province. And we often can be quite dismal and negative about that. There's some actual good signs. The percentage of our healthcare budget spent on administrative expenses, depending on your perspective, was down in 2016-17 from 2012-13, and less than the average in Canada. And we just need to look around our families and our institutions to know we've been tightening our belts in all these sectors, including healthcare. However, the cost of a hospital stay, as well as the overall government healthcare spending per person, is higher than the Canadian average. So we're doing better on administration than we were. Part of it is geographic, although there's some other provinces that are pretty large with dispersed populations. Although as a percent of our population, we continue to be more rural than others. But there are some interesting numbers in there. The CT scan rate per 100 people is higher than the Canadian average, as is the antibiotic prescription rate. And we've heard a lot about that in the news lately, at 955 prescriptions per 1,000 people in the province. Many people in this province receive more than one prescription in a given year. And from what some of what we hear in the media and with the studies that have been done of it, some people go to the doctor demanding prescriptions when that may not be what they need. So again, the essence of vital signs is getting some of these stats out there clearly, presented simply, delivered in every paper in the province with newspapers and radio and TV. Say, what's that all about? Because if we don't have those conversations in our kitchens or boardrooms or NGO tables, it's not going to sink in. Really fortunate to have Dr. Pat Parfrey as one of our experts in this edition, talking about the changes in our population. Our healthcare system needs to catch up to reflect that. Long-term care, consistent with the aging population, consistent with all the we've been out, the 5 vital signs, is fast becoming a big issue in our healthcare system, long-term care. And some of the stats we pulled from the Canadian Institutes for Health information indicate some issues in the province related in long-term care to restraint use. There's been stories on that in the media, as well as potentially inappropriate use of antipsychotics in long-term care. And we all have family members going into various types of homes that have varying levels of training and care provided. So it's an area our healthcare system and our families need to really pay more attention to. But good news, there's a slightly higher rate of improved physical functioning in long-term care in this province. So again, it's unpacking the stats, understanding where we're doing things well, how can we build on it, where do we need to address the challenges. And a bunch of innovations. Government working well with medical profession and other partners. Lots of innovative things happening, and we wanted to highlight some of those. Increased focus on primary healthcare sites around the province to improve access to primary care and reduce unnecessary use of emergency rooms, a key cost driver, and most of the time, not necessary. There's 2 new family practice networks. These are independent networks of family physicians that enable physicians to work together on issues that are affecting their regions. So you pool your resources instead of the isolated physician working alone. Over 250 of the eDocs NL physicians and nurse practitioners, essentially physicians and nurse practitioners who use electronic medical records, which helps improve healthcare and efficiencies. So it's better healthcare and more affordable healthcare, with better collaboration across health professions and also better data. And we have some testimony by Dr. Parfrey as well as Dr. Basler in this section. Moving right along. Healthy living, again, the social determinants of health across a whole realm of activities. Medical access is the last one. Employment, social connections, diet are all critical. So we have a subsection there on healthy living. Food security continues to be a big topic in this province for good reason. And there's a lovely story from the Bay Verte region talking about Green Space Initiative, developing new ways to grow food. And there's examples of that. And of course, an active team at Memorial and a whole bunch in the private sector looking at new opportunities in food security, local food, agriculture in this province. Food cost, though, continues to be a significant issue. We've drawn some StatsCan indicators, look at the weekly cost of nutritious food for a family of 4. That's the stats on the bar chart on the right there. Not surprisingly, it has increased across the board since 2012, but the cost for some regions is significantly higher, particularly in Labrador. And again, there's some real good initiatives on the coast I'm aware of but we need a lot more focus on healthy food and local food solutions. Healthy living, some interesting stats here that every Newfoundlander and Labradorian can relate to. In terms of Newfoundland participation in outdoor activities, we loves our off-road vehicles, ATVs and skidoos, and they're great fun, and I'm dying to get one. I'm jealous of those who do, but they're not necessarily great exercise. So yes, you're out in the air, and hopefully you use it to get to a cool spot to go for a hike, climb a mountain, or go fishing. And we are active in terms of fishing, foraging food. I mean, mushrooms are, I see a few people here I know who forage for mushrooms locally. Most of us are berry pickers. Christy, I see here, promoting a lot of that type of work, and we need more of it. So we are active in the outdoors, but we do have continuing challenges with heavy drinking and obesity. 26% of the population having 4 or 5 drinks a week, compared to 20% for the Canadian average. 38% of the population with a body mass index of 30 or more, compared to 27%, 10% less for the Canadian average. So get off the old off-road and hike some more, because it's lifestyle. So many of the challenges in the healthcare system, this is the good news, are fixable, and you'll be happier. But we got to have that conversation. We got to raise the awareness. Population, as we've gone on and on about, but we think it matters. Some of the key questions: what does the population in Newfoundland and Labrador look like now? And what will it look like in 2036? Some of the work that Jamie Ward, who's here, will be on our expert panel. And Alvin Sims, Harris Center's RAN Lab, the Regional Analytics Lab, pumping out a bunch of reports related to that. And we know population for most of the rural areas of the province has dropped since 2011. Interestingly, for the census period, right in the middle of the boom, the overall population of the province increased slightly between 2011 and 2016. And migration is push and pull. We had the boom with lots of construction jobs and other economic activity. But since the census, and you can't really trust the inter-census data, Jamie can confirm that more, but the indications are clear. That's not a continuing trend. It doesn't necessarily mean that the drop in population, or that drop will not continue since the census. The aging population is inexorable. We need immigration. We need to as much in-migration as we can. But we got to be thinking about enhanced productivity, innovation, and services. Another interesting point here, though, is in the increase in total immigrant population. And we have people here who are going to talk more about that. And the increase in the Indigenous population. Both numbers refer to 2016, not 2018. Indigenous population partly due to a higher fertility rate, but also due to a lot of increase in the number of people identifying as Aboriginal on the census. And that's a trend seen across the country. And then in the top corner on the right there, what does the population look like in terms of languages? Other than English, we can see Indigenous languages at the top there, followed by French, followed by Mandarin and Arabic in significant numbers. And those are just the most common languages. There's lots of others. So we are becoming much more diverse than we were. Continuing on with population, immigration, definitely a key for us to mitigate the aging population, address the labor market needs, and to become a more interesting place. I say it every year, I think, I love to go to Middle Cove when the Capelin are running. The beach is full of people from everywhere in the world, and everybody is equally excited. That's a Newfoundland and Labrador essence of our being that's embraced by everybody. And there's so much of our way of life that's the same, and that people bring better recipes with them. The Association for New Canadians is one of the key organizations assisting newcomers settle into their new home. And there's an article there highlighting some of the work they do around the province. It's a province-wide effort now. It's one thing to attract, though. Retention is key. And it's been raised as one of our main challenges when it comes to increasing immigration. We're actually not doing badly compared to the other Atlantic provinces. The retention rates for family class immigrants is the highest in Atlantic Canada in our province. But compared to provinces like Ontario and BC, we still have a lot of room for improvement. It's also important to understand that these numbers refer to retention rates, not the overall number of immigrants, recruitment. And one particular slice at Memorial that we're quite proud of is on international student retention. Coming to study in our province has increased since 2010 and is slightly higher than Nova Scotia and PEI. And so continuing to bring in highly educated, trained, developing a community while they're here in the university through publicly engaged teaching and learning, work terms, co-ops, internships. Many want to stay. Moving along before Kathy gives me the hook here. Addictions and mental health, really compelling issue in this country and hard to get good data. Repeat hospital stays for people with mental illness were fairly consistent with the Canadian average, but slightly higher in Western and Labrador Grenfell, with 17% and 15% of people admitted to hospital for mental illness readmitted multiple times in the same calendar year. So again, really tangly issues, but that we need to really focus on. Even more concerning maybe, or certainly equally, self-injury hospitalizations are higher in those same regions, Western and Labrador Grenfell, and higher than the Canadian average. And there are some new initiatives to help provide support at the community level for people struggling with mental illness. Some really good programs out there. We'll hear some more about that. We've highlighted a program in the Vital Signs of a program on the Burin Peninsula that is bringing multiple groups together to provide better community supports because it's a multifaceted, holistic approach that's required. Continuing on, Kathy's back, so I'm getting worried. The opioid crisis in North America is scary. In Newfoundland and Labrador, the issue seems to be not quite as severe as in other parts of the country. When you look at the overdose statistics. However, we have a section in Vital Signs with Tree Walsh, coordinator of the SWAP program, says it's still something we need to work on here in this province, citing 23 deaths in the province last year from opioid overdose. And it's not just in St. John, she tells us. The SWAP program is seeing significant drug use, including opioid, across the province. On safety, we have a section on program by Thrive that's helping women who wish to exit the sex trade. There's stats there on the top right on intimate partner violence rates, slightly higher in Newfoundland and Labrador than the Canadian average. And then adult admission stats to the correctional system, essentially the breakdown of people in prison. Indigenous people make up 25% of the total prison population, but only 9% of the total provincial population. And this is on par with Canadian rates, but clearly an issue and a challenge for the whole country. And then you can see the top line there is male, next is Indigenous, next is female. Continuing on with safety, again, when you look at the numbers, some things we always take for granted. We think of ourselves as a safe place. Generally we are, but the stats compared to the Canadian average, not so great. And going in the wrong direction. And when you look at robbery and break and entry, lower, but while the national average drops, we're increasing. So it's really important to unpack all that. We have a piece by Denise Hillier from Stella Circle, giving her insights into the challenges that women, mothers in particular, face in the prison system. Education, one of our favorite topics. Lots of changes currently underway in the K-12 system in the province, coming out of the Premier's Task Force on Education. We highlighted some national data where we definitely still have challenges and we definitely need to work on our system. The Pan-Canadian Assessment Program, which tests grade 8 students to see how well they meet educational outcomes that are common across the provinces. In math, 2016 scores were 21 points below the Canadian average. In science, not as bad, but still relatively worse, scored an average of 7 points lower. The reading scores are broken into 3 categories. Level 1 for the low level, mid-range for level 2, high level, level 3. More Newfoundland and Labrador students than Canadian students scored in the lowest, 71% in the mid, and 11% of Newfoundland students in the highest, Newfoundland and Labrador, 11 compared to 14 for the Canadian average. Another area of discussion in education is inclusive education. A lot of focus on that over the last number of years. And we included a number of students in this province with exceptionalities. As reported in the Premier's Task Force on Education report, a total of 22% of students, over 1 in 5, were reported to have one or more exceptionality that would require specific adjustments in the classroom. And following up on the first Vital Signs report, which reported on literacy issues in the province, we include the story of this year on the adult basic education graduate, Linda Richards. Really positive story. So there's good things happening, but we still have real challenges. And when you think of smaller population, the need to enhance productivity, enhance innovation, it's absolutely essential. Quote David Philpott from Memorial's Faculty of Education, member of the Premier's Task Force on Education, outlining some of his concerns for the education system. And he talks about, again, some of this stuff is so fixable, but it's in families, it's in communities, about attendance and school dropout rates. One of the best indicators of student well-being. Dropout rates in this province shift from year to year, but on average, he says, the equivalent of 2 high schools drop out each year. It's not good enough. And as a community, this is a conversation we have to have. There's also a significant number of students missing more than 20% of classes a year. An indicator Dr. Philpott says we need to be paying attention to, as these are the kids who will drop out later on. So there's early indicators. Almost done. Democracy. Some of these stats we repeat in each Vital Signs, remind ourselves, federal turnout is the highest. So we may complain about Ottawa, but maybe we know we need to vote to get our vote heard. Still not great. Canadian average 68%, Newfoundland and Labrador 61% in 2015. Provincial turnout rate, lower and dropping. 2007, 60 to 57 to 55. Municipal, lower still, but getting marginally better. And we have some more stats here, some improvements in the number of women running for council and getting elected, but still a lot less than male. And some quotes there from Craig Pollitt, and Municipalities Newfoundland and Labrador has been a great supporter of Vital Signs. We have still too many people being acclaimed without a contested election in municipal government. That's the basic level of democracy. And as Craig and MNL has highlighted, and a lot of the work that Harris Center has done over the last number of years, a regional approach is absolutely essential for local government and most of the service provision we're talking about here, not community to community on their own. And we recently released a report as part of our population project by Pat Curran on all this, so I recommend that. And finally, we end with some beautiful stories of a range of types of diversity in a whole bunch of areas around the province, and it's diversity in all its forms. And with this type of embracing of diversity, and it is change, and it is learning to adapt for all of us, people coming in, people who haven't been in the workforce who need to be, and we need them to be. It makes for a fairer society. It makes it more productive, and it makes it more fun. It's a better place to be. But there's still lots of prejudices of every type, and we need these stories and the positives in all of us, especially in this room, and everybody who reads Vital Signs. Become ambassadors, evangelists, because diversity is the key for the future of this province. So we really thank all the partners that make this possible. Our media partner, Saltwire, with the Telegram, the Western Star, the community papers, it'll be in every one of them. That's gold. Our design partner this year, Rogue Penguin, and then our funding partners, because every year, and our community foundation partners work with us on this, it's a slog. Funding is scarce, but we can't have this data for evidence-informed decision-making made accessible and independent without it. So Crosby Group, Enloe, We'll have Paula up on our panel. Municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, Munn Faculty of Medicine, the Woodward Group of Companies, Choices for Youth we'll have up on our panel. PAL Aerospace, YMCA of Newfoundland and Labrador. Can't thank them enough. You can see the long list of people who feed into this from within the university, within the community, from around the country. There's a core team. We'll have some of them up on the panel. But Kathy Newhook carries this for the Harris Center. She's the nexus, the glue, the driver. I'm afraid of her. When we're honing in on the deadline for vital signs, we do what she says, and it delivers. And so we're really delighted to be part of this again. And I'd like to ask our expert panel to come up now. And we'll start off with a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So we have, it says here, James Baker. I think we all know him as Jamie. For over 15 years, Jamie has worked with the Dr. James Baker has worked with the Association for New Canadians and is currently a program manager. From 2016 to 18, he was a Banting postdoctoral fellow at McMaster University, and he holds a PhD in sociology from Memorial University. Paula Shepard is CEO of Newfoundland and Labrador Organization of Women Entrepreneurs, NLO. She is a diligent supporter and fierce advocate for women in business. She is also the vice chair and a founding member of the Women's Enterprise Organizations of Canada. And finally, needing no introduction in this town, I don't think, Sheldon Pollitt has been executive director of Choices for Youth since 2001, during which time the organization has become a national leader and a partner in identifying best practices in the design and delivery of services to youth. In addition to his contributions on several national boards and local boards, Sheldon is the current chair of the Minister's Advisory Committee on Mental Health and Addictions and member of the Center for Social Enterprise Advisory Committee at Memorial. He's a busy guy. Well, I think all these people are very busy, I know, trying to rope them into this session. I'm going to have one question each, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. Start with Jamie. With an aging population, many people suggest immigration is a key factor for us to meet labor demands in the future. What do you think the challenges are for us when it comes to immigration, and what are our strengths?
Thanks, Rob, and thanks for inviting the Association for New Canadians to be at this event today. I think one of the key challenges, and was highlighted in the Vital Signs report for this year, is of course retention. We noted that while we do really well in terms of family reunification, there are some work to be done with regard to economic immigrants and refugees. Now, even our own internal work on refugees suggests that following the Syrian resettlement, our retention numbers have actually, for refugees, have actually increased because there is, a need for a greater community and work within our community partners and with our stakeholders to help address the need for more immigration, and to help with the retention. In terms of what we're doing positive, I think that, it's our work with our community partners and certainly with our community and government partners. Over the years, the association has been delivering settlement services. Next year will be 40 years. And, we've seen over the last 5 or 10 years with the move towards supporting immigration here in the province, that other community partners, multicultural agencies, religious organizations have really begun to see the importance and value of immigration and supporting the inclusion and integration of our newcomers.
Thanks, Jamie. Over to Paula. Tough economic times can be hard on business, but they can also kickstart innovation and entrepreneurship, if you believe what I'm going on about. What opportunities have you seen for entrepreneurs in the province in the last 5 years, and what are the barriers and challenges going forward?
We've definitely seen a trend in entrepreneurship, and we've said a couple of Decembers ago when the budget came out and they said, we're in big trouble in Newfoundland and Labrador. That January, we saw the biggest increase in startups that we've seen in a long time, because people are saying, you know what, we can't depend on getting a job somewhere or whatever. Let's just make a living for ourselves. We've definitely seen a trend in younger people that are starting businesses. When I started working with NLO about 14 years ago, most of the people starting businesses were second career female entrepreneurs. We're seeing now a lot of young women that are coming out and starting businesses, which is fantastic to see. So in terms of opportunities, there's certainly a lot of opportunities out there. There's a more of an innovative mindset. I think working with the university, the Center for Entrepreneurship, the Center for Social Innovation, all of our community partners, people have realized that can make a living for themselves in an innovative way. Certainly in terms of challenges, the first challenge I think for small businesses in general is our population, because we are a very small province. So we're always looking for innovative ways to export your business, sell into new markets, or where are your niche markets. For female entrepreneurs, of course, there are a lot of barriers because people don't really understand what we've seen. And I applaud you for talking about the importance of diversity, because people have not talked a lot about why diversity is so important. And people say, well, we're all equal. It doesn't really, there isn't really an issue. But what you will see is that female-owned businesses are about 16% in Canada, majority owned. But are getting fewer than 5% of contracts in Canada. So there's obviously a gap. Those barriers, of course, are things like access to financing, risk aversion. Women are, of course, the primary caregivers, usually for children and parents, and childcare is always an issue. And a lot of these things are issues across the board. So in terms of, what's been happening, absolutely seeing a lot of really cool stuff happening in terms of entrepreneurship in the province. Yes, there's barriers, but I think by working together, we're certainly moving in the right direction.
Super. Thank you, Paula. Sheldon, over the last 5 years in particular, Choices for Youth has been at the forefront of collaboration with governments, universities, and other organizations. Why has that been so important for you and your organization? What are some of the challenges with that collaboration? And do you think there's more or less appetite for collaboration than there was 5 years ago when Vital Signs started?
I think the key for us, we figured out a long time ago that more of what we already know doesn't work very well will never be the solution in this province. And I think part of that is driven by, watching story after story of young people trying to access services that even when they access them, the services are not well designed to meet their needs in the first place. So access is a bit of an illusion if what I'm offering you doesn't work for you in the first place. The story I always like to tell is, not to pick on my colleagues, Eastern Health, they traditionally had a 30% no show rate in their addictions programming and services. Well, historically, that was considered a cost of doing business. But you have to think about this. Who's least likely to show up in my office at 2:00 on a Thursday afternoon for that appointment, and therefore get bumped to the bottom of a very long waiting list? The person we are most worried about, because they're in throes of addiction, having a tremendous impact on them, their families, their communities, at huge cost to all of us. So innovation, for example, and what you're talking about starts with, having the light bulb moment of what it actually means is 30% of the time I'm wasting my resources because I'm offering people things they do not want or do not meet their needs. So innovation actually starts with how you even see and perceive the information right in front of your face. And how that then drives where you go looking for solutions. We've said for a long time in our province, certainly as an organization, there's not enough time, energy, resource for me to sit in Newfoundland and Labrador and start from scratch with trying to find innovative solutions for some of the biggest social challenges in our communities. I will happily go find someone else who's already done it, who's willing to come here, and we've done it over and over again, and I start with their level of knowledge. I think innovation, and I think a lot of people in government now get it, and certainly in the community have gotten it for a long time, it's how they survived so long, is innovation is not a nice to have anymore in our province. We've got no choice, and actually in a weird way, that's a good thing. We've got no choice but to innovate how we think about the issues and challenges in our province and realize that there's a host of solutions already out there waiting for us to grab.
Super. Thank you, Sheldon. So I'm going to ask our project team to come up, Kathy, Megan, and Jamie, another Jamie, and we're going to open it up to the floor. We have mics that we will run to you, and some gentlemen in the middle there will get the mic to you. Justin, put up your hand. We'll get a mic to you. I'll keep track if there's multiple hands, and you can introduce yourself and ask a question or make a comment. Be brief, because we want to have the dialogue. Quickly, though, I'll introduce our project team. We're bookended by Jamie, so I'm closest to me, Jamie Ward is the researcher and other half of the Harris Center's RAND Lab team, Regional Analytics Lab. Jamie has been working closely with Dr. Alvin Sims for the past 5 years. He's one of the few people on planet Earth who can talk algorithms with Alvin and actually understand each other. And he co-authored the team's extensive list of reports and projects, including the province's population projections released last year, which had a big impact in the media and people thinking about the future. And some of the key input into this year's report. Megan Eibner, I think this is her first Harris Center event. Glad to have you up on the panel, Megan, is the research consultant for this year's 2018 edition of Vital Signs. She has a master's degree in economics from Memorial and worked for 8 years as a senior economist with the Government of Ontario. And finally, Kathy Newhook, who needs no introduction, is Harris Center's Manager of Engagement and Communications. She is the Harris Center's lead on Vital Signs, bringing with her 15 years of communications and engagement experience in government and nonprofit sectors. So I'm good at giving you the skim across the surface. If you want real answers, these are the people who can provide them. Who would like to go first? Gentleman here at the front, Justin. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kevin Bennett. The question is on immigration and outmigration. It seems like we're working in a counteraction. Memorial University are increasing fees for foreign students. We have doctors that go to our medical school. They have no incentive to stay for, say, 6 years. So little projects like that would fund them for a half year of tuition or so, and put in requirements for them to stay. Don't you think something like that might help? Because once people get into our province and living here and bringing their family here, they tend to stay.
Thank you, sir. Who would like to go first on that one?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's a lot of good programs that are being promoted by both the provincial government and the community sector to support newcomers and immigrants to stay in the province. I can't speak to the specifics of the medical school, but I know like with the provincial government, they have various programs under the provincial nominee program to encourage international students to stay in our province. They also have the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, which is a new program that launched last year. And we've seen tremendous uptake from the business community looking to recruit and retain immigrant individuals to our province to help address labor market shortages. And speaking a little bit even about entrepreneurship, we see among our immigrants and certainly some of our refugees have become entrepreneurs that on the, for example, on the West Coast, there was a gentleman who came as part of the Syrian resettlement who opened his own barbershop. And has been, you've probably seen in the news there a few weeks ago. So I think there's a lot of good things that are happening. More certainly could be done, but I think there's a lot of good things that are happening to help encourage immigrants to stay in our province and contribute to our communities.
Thanks, Jamie. Others want to weigh in on that one? Or anybody here from the medical school want to address that one? I know Jim Rourke and the new Dean Margaret Steele have spent a lot of focus on working with communities around the province on retention of doctors in the province. Other questions, comments? Right over here, Justin, and then we'll go over to the middle.
Hi, I'm Ainsley Hawthorne, and I thought I would ask my question, which is also related to immigration. One of the things that seems to play a large role in whether people stay in the province is having a cultural community here from their home country. And since you mentioned that we're seeing improved retention rates for refugees after Syrian refugee resettlement, I'm sure that part of that has to do with the increased number of community members from Syria that we have here now. And it goes to the language statistics as well, that we have Arabic speakers. I just found out there's an Egyptian Coptic church in Mount Pearl. So people can, from Egypt of a Coptic background can practice their faith here. But are there any policy initiatives to sort of support creating communities of people with a common cultural background as a way to improve immigrant retention? Or are there things that can be done at the community level to kind of improve the sense of community that people have as immigrants in their new home?
Thanks, Ainsley.
Thanks for both those questions. Yes, I think there's a lot of things that can be done. I know that from the local perspective, in terms of trying to address myths and support diversity, at the association, we have our diversity initiative, which is hosting its diversity summit next week in Corner Brook, which, the whole point of the diversity initiative is to help change attitudes and to address and respond to myths associated with immigration. In terms of supporting newcomers and building their communities, I think that's a key point to addressing the issue of retention. We also, concerned about social isolationism, and if you have, individuals where they have like communities, especially if they have a very strong religious connections, that helps with their retention, because they not only do they have individuals that they can share their faith with, but they also have individuals that they can potentially speak their same language, and that's a key driver of retention. And we at the association do a lot to promote those type of connections among our clients, which includes not just refugees, but immigrants, economic immigrants, and entrepreneurial immigrants, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot to be done, but I think there's more that could be done. One thing that also pops to my mind is the initiative with the municipalities of Newfoundland and Labrador, and they're promoting their Welcoming Communities initiative, which they just started within the last 6 months, and they have an individual hired in Corner Brook who's working with our satellite office out there. Now they're looking to hire someone in Lab City, and again working with our satellite offices to help promote and encourage immigration and multiculturalism.
Super. Anyone else on that one? Jamie's the expert on that field. Gentleman in the middle there, Justin. And introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks. Brandon Copeland. Similar question. I was thrilled and honestly surprised to see such a positive number in terms of international student retention. And I'm a Nova Scotian, and I moved to Newfoundland to attend school, and I've decided to stay. But what I saw from a lot of my mainland friends is that they finish their degree and move on. So I'm wondering if Vital Signs has stats or has taken a look at retention rates for folks from other provinces, and if they differ from international students, and if so, do we know why that is, or is it harder or easier to keep folks from other parts of Canada? My perception's off, and maybe we're doing just excellent at keeping students from other provinces.
Great question. And all these questions, by the way, and we have a dialogue during the year, first part of the year, to inform what we put in next year's Vital Signs. So we're taking notes here. There's a few people here might be able to comment on that one. Jamie, do you have anything on that one? I think the other Jamie might, and maybe
Yes,
Megan or Kathy.
I think because it speaks to specifics of the report, I think I would pass on to your colleagues.
Okay.
It's definitely an interesting question. I don't know that there's anything already done on that particular issue, but it's a question we could probably bring back to our memorial colleagues to see whether or not they're tracking that, and whether there's any efforts being made to see whether there's programs that can be put in place or efforts to be made. Jamie, I know you know a lot about interprovincial migration. I don't know if you
I don't know anything particular from that source. I know that is it the Center for Institutional Analysis at MUN?
Yep, SIAP.
They keep track of a number of things.
Mm.
But I mean, obviously, it would fall into, from a data perspective, into the overall interprovincial migration stats. And so this is actually a question I've been wrestling with for the past week or so. So like, shout out to that about how to incorporate the retention of say Memorial University when people come, but also on the municipal level about where do they, how do we make services in such a way to attract retention of students and stuff like that, right?
So that's one we'll definitely highlight for consideration next year, if not before. Gentleman here at the front and over here next. Oh, and back there next. Okay. Is that Tony? Tony, did you want to answer? Is that Tony Fang? No. Okay. No, you can go ahead. Sorry. Can't see with the post.
Yeah, my name is Fred Phelan. Just want to say one comment that the work that you guys are doing is fantastic. And Rob, I think it's a great service to the community. So
Thanks, Fred.
you didn't pay me to say that, but
No, no.
it is a great work. I did notice one thing that sort of struck me was this issue around household savings rates. And, you know, being a quasi-economist, I look at these things. And the buffer, I consider that maybe a buffer. Others might not consider it a buffer, but it's basically been halved over the study period to about, you know, $2,700. And I'm wondering if folks are concerned that in the context of impending energy costs about to bloom and interest rates going up and other disruptions in trade markets with tariffs and the like, that prices generally going up, does that put a red bell? Does that ring the red bell for folks that the buffer has been reduced, the prices and consumer expenditures are about to go up significantly in the province? Where does that put households 2 years from now? And are we worried about that? And is that a study point for you for the next period?
Thank you, Fred. Who'd like to weigh in on that one?
Sounds like a Rob question.
Sure, none of our expert panel want to weigh in on that? Or Jamie?
I mean, I can.
Yeah, sure.
I can
I don't
give it a
mind.
stab here. This is something, as we've been moving the past little bit towards more comprehensive population modeling within some of our Round Lab projects, this is something that we've sort of taken an interest in, you know, in sort of different scenarios for how, especially on the expenditure side, because, and I mean, it's a very widespread sort of general question, because I mean, you've got population aging, you know, and historically, according to the data, I mean, you know, seniors obviously have very different expenditure profiles than younger people. And so, I mean, it means things for retail. I think for 65 plus households, I think 4% of their expenditures are electric power. It's the single largest expenditure, you know, after taxes for those households, you know, on average on the whole. And so, I mean, it's obviously if you double that, I mean, that's 8%. I mean, there's I think 3 times what they spend on prescription medication. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer, really, from that perspective, right?
And I think on personal consumption, and Kathy's heard me wax endlessly on this one, you know, just to be slightly provocative, depending on the audience. I think Thorsten Veblen was more accurate than Karl Marx. Veblen said it's all about conspicuous consumption. And our society in the last decade has been driven by it. There's people left out of it, but 4/5 of the population are driven by it. And we're spending like never before. And as long as there's boom, that's cool. So I think, again, these discussions about what matters in life and what you can afford and good stats on what's facing us is critical. Good. Okay, we have gentlemen over here, but while you're over there, let's get that gentleman and then straight over there.
I'm James Rosario. I'm an immigration consultant, and I also sit on the Labor Market Council, and I attend the labor initiative, immigration initiative in Newfoundland. Anyway, this is more of a comment than a question. I was driving the other day, and I heard on the radio that the province is providing $1 million to study why, to understand why people are leaving the province. I can't believe that they're going to spend something like that. But anyway, every time I attend an immigration session, the first thing that I always ask them, this is because this question always arises, like, why do people leave? And every time I ask them, they don't know. I understand there's a professor at Memorial University who has a report, a study on that. But that was years ago. Now I'm very active in the Filipino community, and nobody came and approached us and asked us, why are immigrants leaving? Because for me, the immigrants, it's easier for them to leave. They haven't put down roots here yet. Even if they've been here for 2, 3, 4 years, it's easier for them to move to another province rather than the locals, right? But nobody has even ask any one of us, why are people leaving? And I know that a lot of Filipinos are moving to other provinces. And there's a lot of reasons. Me, for instance, I want to move. Has anybody asked me why I'm moving? No, right? So that's one thing that we need to address, like exactly why people are leaving the province. We seem to be assuming that we know the answer. We always say, oh, people are leaving because, but is it really the reasons why where people are leaving? So I think that's one very important thing that we need to know, like why people are leaving the province, exactly why. But I don't think $1 million is, you know. So well, that's just my comment.
Okay, we can see, I think Jamie may have some thought and others. I know for employers, if you lose an employee, an exit interview is extremely important and informative. I do know Tony Fang has a research group at Memorial who would be very much into some of what you're interested in. And if you haven't connected with them, I can certainly help you. But Jamie or others want to address that one?
Sure. I think generally when we talk about why people leave, and it's not just related to immigrants, but Newfoundlanders and Labradorians in general, is the perception of lack of jobs and employment. Whether that's true or not is another question, because we seem to have a significant labor market demand in certain sectors. And so I think, part of the reasons people think that there are no jobs in Newfoundland, whether that's true or not, I don't know. And then there's a negative perceptions around that. I know for refugees, some of the reasons why they leave is that oftentimes is because they have family members in other provinces. So the way that refugees are destined to our country is that they're chosen by the UNHCR to be resettled in Canada, and then they're destined to, then Canada destines them to a particular province. Once they arrive here, they arrive and they say, well, I have a sister that lives in Toronto, so we're moving. And you can understand why. I mean, if they have no family here, right, or no connections, then, and they have family members in other provinces, then it makes sense that they want to leave. So those are the two, from my perspective, those are the two driving factors, I think, that may help explain retention.
Thanks, Jamie. Others? Yeah, Paula?
I'm by no means an expert on immigration, so I don't really, but I think I've seen, just as an outside perspective, I'm seeing a thread here, which I think is really important for us to bring up. And Sheldon mentioned it earlier, is when you're talking to certain groups about diversity and how we can service those groups, you need to ask the people who are the groups instead of, because us as, as managers or academics or whatever, we can come up with theories as to why we do these things. But if you don't ask those people, it's sort of, a moot point. We can think what we want. And just back to the retention, it's sort of funny. My dad is actually from Ontario and came here as a doctor and stayed in rural Newfoundland. But I think it's important for us as a community, thinking about why he stayed was because he was embraced by his community. And when people don't even know now that he's not a Newfoundlander, he's been here for 40 some odd years. But I think it's important for all of us as a community to embrace the new immigrants, embrace people that are coming in, help them become a part of their community so that they don't want to leave because they've established relationships and roots here. So just, I guess, two general comments.
Great. Anyone else on the panel on that one? Okay, we have a gentleman right here at the front with, yep. And then we'll go back here.
Hi, my name is Brian Peach. My question is about, I guess, the vital signs. I guess it's a statistic I'd like to see if it's possible for you guys to start collecting this data. We talked about how we're sort of in a boom and bust economy. And for me, and what you said earlier, when the bust happens, that's when everyone gets innovative and entrepreneurial. And it's a shame because in the booming part is when we're most capable of probably doing that. So is there any stats that we're tracking on, say, businesses, not just small businesses, but medium and large businesses that are trying to expand? Is there a hotel that could hire a business, an accommodations promoter who could then increase tourism? But why doesn't that hotel owner want to sort of go on that venture? Why aren't the businesses pushing to grow and expand as much as we all think? I guess a lot of economic talks that I've ever read in books, they think businesses are doing everything they can to maximize their profits. And I don't think that's true. I think business owners make enough money doing what they're doing and then they're content. and they don't want to push and expand, and maybe we should be targeting them a bit more. So
Mhm.
do we survey businesses? How do we figure out whether even individuals themselves, when times get tough, are they trying to cut back on spending versus maybe now's the time to invest in my professional development and myself try to go earn more? Do we track any of those things, and can maybe we get that kind of information in the vital signs report?
I'll let our panel address that. I have one answer I'll add, but you go first, Paula.
Okay, I'm not a statistics expert, but I do work quite a bit in the business community. And what we have seen from small businesses is that you're partially right, is that when the economy starts to go down, everybody starts to pull back because they also have to save because they don't know what their profit margins may or may not be because consumer spending is down. And you'll certainly see that in the small business community. When consumer spending goes down, everybody pulls back. I have heard some really great advice from some more prominent business owners that are saying, okay, when the boom was good, we weren't watching our bottom line as much. We were spending a lot more money. We weren't, doing some of the things we were doing. Now, when times are tight, is the time for us to regroup. And then as things start to get more profitable, then we can do more investments. But what I have seen in the last maybe 5 or 6 years that I haven't seen a lot for was the business community coming together to partner on a lot of things. So it used to be, I'm doing my business and this is what I do. Now it's like, okay, this is what I do, but I'm going to buy from you, who's now going to buy from you, who's going to hire 3 more people to do something like that. And I think government has come in with some really good programming in terms of, hiring new Canadians or hiring underrepresented youth or, things like that. So we can engage more people in the community, more earning potential. So we're moving there, but I certainly see that it dropped and it's sort of going a little bit better. Can we do better? Yes, of course we can do better. But according to the statistics part, I'll put it over to these.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. Sorry. I think, I'm inviting myself into the conversation. I think the other piece is we often leave out an entire sector and traditionally known as the nonprofit sector. But I mean, one of the things now happening in this country is a huge move towards social enterprise and social procurement and impact investing. And it's really a partnership between public, private sector and also the nonprofit community who can enter into the equation in ways that for a long time, many people didn't think was possible. One of the things we look at from a social procurement perspective is, what's the money government's going to spend anyway, for example? Certainly in a time, this is the innovation part of this, in a time when resources are limited, so governments begin to retract, businesses begin to retract. But part of it is there's still X amount of money that's still going to circulate to that economy by governments buying things, by businesses buying things. But if you actually start thinking about it in terms of how can I maximize the impact of, that spend, the money government's going to spend anyway on, the federal government, for example, just announced a $40 billion 10-year national housing strategy. So it's going to provide, housing options across this country for folks who need affordable housing. But if you purposed even 10% of that to say we want to see some form of community benefit or some form of social enterprise activity as a part of that, you begin employing in a much more sustainable way the very people who also need that affordable housing. So I think when it comes to the more economic argument, there's a whole host of people who can participate in that conversation as well. That's where some of the real innovation I'm seeing in our country is beginning to happen, and certainly in our province.
Buy local. So if you're going to buy something from somebody locally, because that's where you support your businesses. So if you're going to spend something that you're buying anyway, it's exactly to your point, don't buy it online at Amazon. Try to find it locally in a local business, because whether it's a franchise, because sometimes people say, oh, it's just a franchise, I'm not going to spend my money there. You're still employing people to have that business here. So it's really important to buy local.
Megan.
We have time. I was just going to add quickly in terms of actual data that could be in a vital signs type document. I do know that Statistics Canada publishes business data in terms of business entrance, new businesses, the size of businesses by the number of employees. So that is definitely something that we could get access to and track over the years and look at the differences and the changes in boom years and bust years.
And the little snippet I'd put in on that one is there are programs in the US, it's big in free enterprise US of A, state and county government are very active in what's called business retention and expansion. And it's not rocket science, but the local chamber of commerce or the municipality go out and visit municipalities in their area, and they develop a database of what are the challenges you're facing, what are the growth plans, are you going to need certain types of infrastructure, are you connecting with the regional colleges for the skills? And Newfoundland and Labrador did, and maybe still has, that program, and some of the industry associations did it. But if you haven't seen that program, I'd recommend it, because it's well established. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and it gets at exactly the kind of stuff you're talking about. Gentleman right in the middle here. You can, again, someone who needs no introduction, but you can introduce yourself.
Charlie Oliver. I'd like to start off by saying, if I had someone to tell me I had to have 2 root canals, the bank was calling all my loans, my wife was leaving me, I think I want Rob to be delivering it. He's the most optimistic, effervescent, metric maestro next to myself. A couple of private sector guys here with me is where the rubber meets the road. What I find great about what you're doing, and so it's a great compliment, is you're taking some of the complex numbers that many people don't take the time to get through, to go down to the layers of the onion without all the tears, and you're putting them out into readable, easy, understandable format in metrics and like the bubbles and all that. They're fabulous. The interesting thing about myself, and I know Rob is the same, is while we have to put out the history, the background to know where we are, we don't and we can't drive our vehicles looking out the rearview mirror. And I've been saying that many, many times. So from what you do, what's important to me and my colleagues is what you project and what you sense and what you talk about in the future. So the question is, are there any plans to take the futuring on the knowledge base that you have and to provide guidance or suggestions on, here's where we expect population to go. Here's the changes we expect to see in education. Here's what we're expecting to see with the blending of our culture. And that goes from indigenous populations to our whole transgender life that we're all living in. So as me, a 65-year-old guy who's been in business forever, and following this and aware of it, are you now going to say, okay, I have these new ideas and these new formats, or I can take this stat from Statistics Canada, which is double Dutch for most of us reading it, and make it readable? So the question is, are you going to change it to engage with us more and give us tools for the future?
Great question, and I'll let our panel jump in if they like. But it's one I can certainly address first from Harris Center perspective, and working with the Community Foundation. The Vital Signs document is really fulfilling its mandate as a report card to inspire dialogue and discussion. But it's where the partnership with the Community Foundation for Harris Center and Memorial is a match made in heaven, in my opinion, because a lot of the work we're doing in the Harris Center in collaboration with faculty and students across the university is exactly along the lines of what you're describing. I'd love to chat some more about any particular ideas. So you take the population project that the Harris Center is doing, led by Keith Story as our research director, using some of the work Alvin and Jamie have done, did exactly those projections out to 2036, I think, by sub-region in the province, which hadn't been done before, and certainly with the rigor they've done. But that helps paint the picture of, if things stay on course where we are, or not on course, where are we going to wind up? But then the in-depth research that Keith has done in getting researchers in consultation with community leaders, what are we going to do about it? So it's partly the policy and practice, and there's 4 or 5 reports that we've released now on the Harris Center website, initially focused on Labrador because it was the International Grenfell Association that funded that work, and it does come down to money. But I'd love to chat some more with you about some of that. Kathy, did you want to jump in as well, or someone else?
Yeah, I think Jamie's waiting as well. But I just wanted to say we've always wanted to do more with the product once it's out the door. For us, it's a challenge for resources, of course, but it's we have this beautiful new facility that we really want to have some interesting programming for community forums and sessions. And what greater tool to use that we have at our disposal of Vital Signs to go through that now and look at each theme, each issue, pull out the interesting stuff, see if we can assemble a great panel like this. And we can assemble a panel specific to any number of the issues that are pulled out there. And then we can have a discussion about solutions. It's not something that the Harris Center is going to carry forward the solutions or the Community Foundation is, but certainly we can be a platform for that kind of discussion and that energy and action. And I think Jamie had some other stuff.
And just to quickly add to Kathy's point, this facility is not just for St. John's, but thanks to federal funding we got, it's wired to the hilt. So we can have interactive sessions with College of North Atlantic campuses, Grenfell campus, Labrador, et cetera, et cetera. So it can be a provincial and beyond. Sorry, Jamie, yours.
Sorry, just a note about projections as it pertains to Round Lab. I think from the beginning, Round Lab's always been very oriented towards a decision support sort of perspective. So, I mean, if you look at the population projections, sure, I mean, we have sort of the traditional cyclical population model if everything continues. But we have another model there about replacement numbers where we say, okay, if you're going to, be able to maintain your economy, with say a 70 or 80 or 100% retention of workers, how many people do you need to have for each community? And I think that's more useful from a policy perspective if you're saying like, oh, what are our targets? Sort of from that perspective. I apologize for my voice today. Some of the more recent work we've been working on has been taking those same concepts and really, making them more, being able to translate them to other sort of topics. So I mean to say like, so here's what your markers are. If you meet that, what does it mean for housing? What does it mean for spending? What does it mean for skills in your labor force? These types of things, and presenting them in sort of an open-ended way so that people can take them and say, okay, here's where we start, I guess.
Thanks, Jamie, and lots more discussion we could have if you like on that, Charlie. One last, we're supposed to be out of here at 3:30, so quick comment or question.
Hey folks, my name is Ayan Shahed. I have a request for drilling down on some of the data in future vital signs, but potentially some commentary from you guys. The report highlights a couple of things that we kind of know intuitively. 40% of the province is in the Northeast Avalon, but it also talks about how we're already living regionally. So I'm curious about data in terms of migration across regions and what's driving that. Are people moving for economic reasons, for opportunities, for entrepreneurship, for services, escaping discrimination, that kind of thing? From the panel, you guys have an insight on what's driving that movement, and are people succeeding when they move, and why are they moving?
Superb question. We need succinct, insightful answers. Jamie, did you want to answer quickly on within province?
I could speak within the province. I mean, I think that if you look at some of our older functional region work that we've done a few years ago, I mean, we did a lot of work into sort of the economic migrations within the province. A lot of it's conspicuous. I mean, you look at every community in the province outside of St. John's, and you'll have a hole between like 20 and 24 where it'll just drop down. And then St. John's is the only spot that's opposite. It's not hard to figure out sort of thing where they're going and why they're going there sort of thing. But I think you'd look for specific surveys sort of thing. From the modeling perspective though, I mean, the data is really really good, especially in 2016. Not only in terms of intra-provincial, like within province migration, but also commuting as well is also very good. Because I mean, a lot of times people, they can commute across the country now. Something that would have been migration before. I mean, and it's an established part of that. Just it's part of how it is now. So.
Thanks, Jamie. Final comment from any of the panel.
I do think in terms of some of the people that are staying in rural Newfoundland are the entrepreneurs who are creating businesses in order to stay in their hometown. We did see quite a spike. We did a survey on female entrepreneurship. We did see quite a spike over 10 years of those that were located on the Northeast Avalon, but we are also seeing a significant group of young people that are starting businesses in these small communities because they want to live there, they want that lifestyle. And we're starting to model those. So working with municipalities, working with other groups to say, okay, how can we model some of the things that are happening on the Bonavista Peninsula in other parts of the province to try to keep earning money and staying within their communities.
Any final comments from the panel?
I'll speak to it really quickly. Just going back to a lot of our conversation has been about diversity. And I think not just because of the work that I do and have done for a very long time, but just in terms of the information presented, very diverse information. Beginning to come to terms with, that diversity also speaks to a diversity of experiencing even what it means to live in Newfoundland and Labrador. Because I can guarantee you, if you're one of those women who is among the statistics that says we have the highest rate of domestic violence in the province, you very much live in a very different version of Newfoundland and Labrador. The youth we work with, in the 2,000 people a year who go to the gathering place now at this point, coming to understand that in a very different way of what that diversity actually means from that perspective. And it's not all negative, but it also begins driving, thinking about it's that person's experience that we actually have to understand in a much deeper way, and not similar to asking people who, are new Canadians who may or may not want to move away. I think we fail often to understand what that diversity means in terms of how people even perceive what living in Newfoundland and Labrador even means. To go to Aon's question, and it's cheating because Aon works with Choices of Youth. We see young people all the time. When you arrive at our emergency shelter in St. John's, you're from central Newfoundland with all your earthly belongings in a Sobeys bag because there's nowhere else for you to go to find emergency shelter. How do we deal with that? How do we think about differently in terms of what sports and services look like across the province? We know the Pit Camp, for example, showed that over 50% of the homeless population in St. John's has moved to St. John's within the last 3 to 5 years. People are coming to get away from things and coming to access things, and it's somewhat of a combination both in most instances. So we need to think about these things in terms of, again, fundamentally, innovation starts with how you even think about the information that's staring you right in the face, and not just relying on the traditional approaches that we've tried to great expense and poor outcomes.
Jamie, any final comment?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, my point sort of crosses 3 points, diversity, immigration, and food security. We have a program that's funded by the Workforce Innovation Center out of Corner Brook and the College of North Atlantic, in which we have refugees who have come to our province and have a skill set in farming. And we're looking at pairing these individuals with established farms across the province to help support them and to learn from one another the different types of farming processes that are used in their home country versus what's here used in Newfoundland. And we're finding that with some of these farms, the owners are looking to retire. Their children may not want to take over their farms, but we need to maintain a support network to ensure that they have the access to, dairy, eggs, so on and so forth. And we don't know what that's going to turn out to be. It's only in the beginning of year 2 of a year pilot, but it looks promising, and hopefully good things will come out of it. And of course, one last thing I want to say is that when we talk about immigrants, and the economy, we often talk about economic immigrants. The key thing is that refugees also contribute well to our economy. It may take them a little longer because they have to learn our language, but we're finding that once they get their bearings in English, they're getting jobs, they're keeping them, and they're paying taxes and contributing to our society and to our economic base.
Thank you, Jamie. Kathy, anything last?
I think the only thing I have left to say is thank you to everyone. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's been a lot of fun, and it's really great to see such a big turnout and great questions and discussion.
And I'll echo that. Megan, Jamie, good? Good. They're available all the time, though, and the conversation is just beginning with the release of Vital Signs, and we look forward to going in all the papers, and I know we're booked in other media this week. Thanks to the Community Foundation, none of this could happen without you. They also use this in their own determination of priorities and opportunities for funding in the community. So this is a tool for them right from the start. And for the Harris Center, we can't thank you enough. And we will be back in this room on October 25th, if you're not signed up already. The first official conference at the Signal Hill campus is People, Place, and Public Engagement, October 25 to 27. Go to the Public Engagement website. Had to get my little advertorial in there. Really look forward to the conversation coming out of this. Lots of big issues and lots of opportunities for next year's Vital Signs. So thanks again. Thanks to the people who are viewing online. We were webcasting as we had this session, and look forward to lots more collaboration to come. Thank you very much.